So I hope you're in the right room. This is about MadeToPrint, piece of software from axaio. And this is going to be a presentation that's a bit more on the general level at the beginning, and will become somehow more technical as we get deeper into it. Not too technical, you don't have to understand every bit of the screenshots I'm going to show. This is meant to give you an overall idea of what MadeToPrint actually is. It should even be useful for people who may have used or sold MadeToPrint in the past. But we have observed that a lot of people who have some knowledge of MadeToPrint are missing out on, let's say, 90% of what it can do. So let's start with the beginning. MadeToPrint is 22 years old. It was started in spring 1995 in the project with Der Spiegel, a major news weekly in Germany, and was turned into a product already in October 1995. So it's really 22 years and a few days, quite some time. It's beyond drinking age already, so it's quite a bit. And it also early on had something to do with Austria. So the first customer outside of Germany we found was a newspaper in Austria called Oberösterreichische Nachrichten. And they had a guy who was doing nothing else than sitting at the workflow system, which was QPS, the Quark publishing system at that time, and was always watching a certain window whether a file reached a certain stage. And when the file reached a certain stage, that person would check out the file, print the file in a certain way, and close it again. So not the most intelligent job in the world, but at that moment, the only way how you could do this, because they wanted to have printouts on a certain laser printer immediately when an article or a newspaper page reached a certain stage, so that the next person could find out about it, review it, and do his job. So that was the first sale of the MadeToPrint product outside of Germany. I think it was even the first proper sale, actually, because Der Spiegel was a project. And soon after, as we tried to sell MadeToPrint all over the world, we also managed to find a company near New York City who were also QPS users of the Quark publishing system, but not the typical publisher. It's a company dealing in airline menus. Do you remember those? You know these if you fly business, but in economy they have almost completely gone. I had a menu on my flight to and back from Japan just a couple of days back, but it's not the norm anymore. And there's a company specializing in printing airline menus, and they have done so for, I think, 30 years or more. And it's really a challenging thing because you have to publish in many languages. It was much more challenging 21 years ago than it is today. You have to Chinese, Japanese, Korean, you have to Arabic, Hebrew, Cyrillic and Greek and this and that, and because they fly all over the world, right? That's why you fly. And it's also important in terms of the content. There's certain things you do not speak about in certain cultures. So you talk about it differently. And so they had a team of, I don't know exactly, like 25 people from all over the world sitting in their office, taking care of translations on the language level, but also on the cultural level. Because it was a highly convoluted workflow with lots of control stages, because already the smallest mistake could cause big problems. Just envision important people flying business or first running into something annoying on the airline menu. That's a no-go. So they use QPS to organize the whole thing, and then of course output, both print output and at that time PostScript file output and later on PDF output, had to be done in a very controlled fashion. And a human being doing it was just not the right way to do it. They needed an automated machine, and they used MadeToPrint to take care of all the output processes. That's how they present themselves today. Airline menus are not the major business anymore for a number of reasons, but they are very good specialists at doing multicultural business publishing. So it was the first customer outside of German-speaking countries. They are still a customer. It's one of the most loyal customers we have. Marty Jäger, who's the IT, the CTO, really is always nudging us to come up with updates as soon as possible because he wants to use the latest technology everywhere. They're still on QPS, by the way. And they are happy users of QPS. It's not that they are not happy with it. Also interesting. The US turned into an important region for us. Another interesting customers, and I mentioned it because they were kind of ahead of the time, was the First USA Bank. It's one of their buildings. They're not called First USA anymore because there have been mergers and acquisitions like every other 2 years. They did targeted marketing of credit card contracts. And they kind of fine-tuned their marketing efforts on a very fine-grained level. So they would do mailings for like 500 people of this type of people, and then 500 of that type. And they were looking at demographics like young and old, and male and female, and what kind of job they had, and income, and so on, and they're fine-tuning everything. So the young business professional probably had different needs than an elder person, already retired maybe, but lots of money anyway. So they did lots of very targeted mailers, which is the norm today. That's when you try to fine-tune your targeting today. You do it much more easily than you could do 20 years ago, but they already did it in 97, 98. And the mailers were different for each of the target groups, which were very small target groups. And also an important thing was that the credit cards were different. So there was a lot of people who are very open to getting a design for the credit card that just matches their lifestyle and what they think is important. And all these processes, because you only have like a mailer for 500, 1,000 people, that means you have many different mailers. Many different mailers means slightly different text, but more importantly, different graphic design. So they had over 70 layout people using Quark Express at that time, hammering out one design after the other. Yeah. And using that design, and of course they did like tests. They sent out the mailer to the first 200 or 500 people, and the same type of group, 5 different designs, and they found out what the best return rate was, and then they used that design on a larger group. And they had like thousands of designs at any given time. They used QPS to keep it all together, and they used MadeToPrint for the numerous output processes they had to do, like control print, proofreading, legal, creating the PostScript file for print production, and so on. So again, I found, at that time I found that really interesting and challenging because they were really ahead of time. Most other banks were still doing the old-fashioned stuff, and they have been very successful. And that's why they have been acquired within a year or two after that by an even more bigger bank. We have customers from all over the place. So I'm just showing a couple of pictures here just to give you an idea which type of company or business organization may be using MadeToPrint. And I'll get into what MadeToPrint actually is after that. Edeka is one of the major chains of supermarkets in Germany. I think they are the biggest at this time. Power companies, power and utility companies. So this is Energie Baden-Württemberg, which is a major German supplier of electricity. We have the European Commission, like public administration. We have the Sparkasse, which is a savings bank in Germany, also a huge organization. Again, it's a kind of large-scale department store or supermarket, broadliner, Home Depot, you may know, like do-it-yourself stuff, construction, home improvement. Lego is a customer. Have, of course, all kinds of documents they need to produce. TUI, I always like this picture. So, tourism industry, Red Bull. Red Bull, is this something that is known in the US? Yeah. It's big? Okay, good. Huh? Jägermeister, yeah. We try to keep this drug-free as much as possible. Yeah.
Enormous explosion.
It's a night of gaps.
You seem to be familiar.
They bring that apparently in the United States. I've never heard that you make Jägermeister with Red Bull.
Each of those is challenging already. Anyway, major insurance companies and so on. And of course, we also do newspapers and magazines, kind of the core business area where we have sold MadeToPrint to over the years, including titles like National Graphic or Time Magazine or Sports Illustrated or Business Week or what have you. New York Times, I'm very proud we have this customer. We have had them for almost 20 years, I believe. So it's one of the first customers in this business that we found in the US. And magazines like this guy or this one. So all kinds of special interest magazines of really all types. So over time we've collected quite a number of, I believe, interesting customers. Most of them tend to stay. It's not that they buy MadeToPrint and leave it behind after 3 years. Most of them find that it's a very essential part of the overall workflow. Most of them probably don't think about it a lot because once you set it up and it works, it's like it works, right? Do you think about your power plug? It would be difficult without it, right? If you didn't have any power plugs in your IT. So it's like that. It's not that people discuss it all the time, but it's an essential piece for many document production workflows. So what is it actually? I was just using MadeToPrint without making it clear what it is about. I think the tagline here, intelligent printing and exporting, is pointing in the right direction. So it's called MadeToPrint, right? I mean, in 1995, we weren't quite sure exactly which direction things would develop. We may have chosen a different name if we had not understood what will be coming in the next 22 years. It's called MadeToPrint because where it all started, and still is closely tied to printing, but not only to printing. Maybe we should rather call it export. But still, it's export to a final form of content. Print is just one variation of that. In almost any case, it's like you work on content. So content is something you can easily edit, you can develop. And at certain stages, you make a decision, I want to have a representation of this content at that stage. And then you create output. And that could be an early stage of an article. You just want to do some discussion or review. It could be the almost final copy, and you do a legal review, or you do proofreading, you double check whether the layout is what you want it to be. And at each of these points in time, you create some output. And it could be output on a laser printer, becoming less and less common. It could be a PDF you send by email to somebody else. It could be an image of a page, like the title page you want to share with the marketing department and other people. And images are still the most easy to exchange and display type of content, so they can discuss the visual appeal of the title page. All kinds of things. Thumbnails for workflow systems and what have you. All of these would count as output. And so let's settle on output. Yeah, MadeToPrint is about creating output. And the various types of output you can actually create in MadeToPrint are listed here. It's a pop-up menu in the setup dialog for MadeToPrint. Of course, you can send PostScript to a printer. That's the the old thing, you can save out PostScript files as PostScript or as EPS files, which then will be by page. You can create print PDFs or interactive PDFs. In this case, this is taken in the screenshot was taken in the context of Adobe InDesign. JPEG, PNG, TIFF image files. In InDesign, you can export to IDML, InDesign document markup language, to Swift, or to Flash CS6, which is becoming less and less relevant. Who's still using Flash in some fashion? EPUB, who's creating EPUB from InDesign Quark Express? Yeah, it's not the biggest money maker in the world. Interesting, you can also save out an InDesign file. You can decide not to create output. Why would you want to do that? A tool to create output and then you don't create output? You should know.
Updating content.
Yeah. So there's a lot of other things. I will get into this in the next slides. There's a lot of things you can do on the side. In some workflows, the things on the side can become more important than the actual creation of output, like updating content. So as part of the processing of InDesign or Quark Express files, you can update linked images, for example. Or you can use JavaScript to do stuff to your content in an automated fashion. Maybe you just want to open, update the links, change some information, and save back. No output. You could argue the output is a new InDesign file, but in principle it's the same file, just saved back or checked back into the system. And for each of these output options, you have lots of additional options. So for PDF export in InDesign, you can use PDF export styles, but you're not confined to them. You can do things on top of that. In these export styles, PDF export styles in InDesign, you already have a zillion options to set up how the export is being done. You can export to JPEG, then of course you have different options. JPEG is a different file format, and it's not that many options, but still all the relevant parameters you can set up when creating JPEG, and the same applies to the other formats. It's in a way also what you run into when you manually operate InDesign or Quark Express. You have all the options, but we don't stop there. This is an output option that may not be obvious right away, but for some it's a very important one. You can also output, for example, your InDesign file to a package. A package is a folder with all the bits and pieces needed to successfully process that InDesign file, like the fonts and the images and so on, which is also good for exchanging your content maybe with some other department or organization, or putting it in the archive or whatever. And so this is a setup here, and you have all the options that you already have when you would be using this in InDesign manually. Copy the fonts, link graphics, update graphics, and so on. You have a way to define exactly what to call the package or where to put it on the disk by using the setup area at the top, which I will get into in one of the later slides. So again, lots of things you can output to. And then you can combine these. You can combine a print job, like to a laser printer, a creation of thumbnails in the form of JPEG images, InDesign package, all the processing around, like updating and what have you, low-res PDF for sending by email, production quality PDF for sending to a printer, all in one transaction. So you can combine various made-to-print jobs in a sequence of steps and just do it in one transaction. That's what is being shown here. So this of including settings is like individual made-to-print jobs that get combined into one processing step. And it could be anything. It could be whatever you need. And we have customers who have such lists of settings as a made-to-print job for all kinds of stages in the production, like early phases of content development, and then proofreading and actual production, archiving, and so on. And also sending information in some form, like images or low-res PDFs, into other parts of the workflow system or the editorial workflow system. So lots of options to create output, lots of options to combine these. Now a little bit more about the flow in the workflow. And there's zillions of options, and that's why I think this presentation may be interesting for some of you because you may not be aware of all these options. I will not go into too much detail here, but I want to make you understand the implications of this. So you can use scripting. It's admittedly more powerful in InDesign than in some of the other applications. So in InDesign you can do almost everything you can do manually, also by JavaScript, and then a few more things. And you can do run scripts. And these could also be Apple scripts or JavaScript or shell scripts, but most interesting is JavaScript. In InDesign you can do scripts before doing the printout, so to speak, and you can do things afterwards. And the capabilities are endless. You could do something like send an email after printing. You run a shell script or whatever, Visual Basic or Apple script, and just send an email, maybe with the content you just created. So this is massive. Of course, it requires some coding. So you have to know how to write the script or get somebody to write the script for you. We will be more than happy to help you, at least with some of the simpler scripts. We have done quite a few of them in support for some of our customers. So René is really familiar with a lot of things. Very important bit. You can also run a preflight check. And that would be, for example, InDesign to check for certain things before you actually try to print it out or create a PDF or whatever. So if the fonts are missing, the images are not there, they have been modified, or other problems might exist, you want to know about these before you actually start doing something. And if there are missing links for images, for example, you can ask this preflight step to update them. You can even say, don't look where you usually look somewhere else because my images tend to live in this other folder. And there's a part of the preflight that we do ourselves, and there's a part where we actually use the InDesign preflight option. There you just pick a setting for whatever you have set up as InDesign preflighting. And then, depending on what you find out, you can decide not to process or to continue processing. And you can create a report file, so maybe pick up the information about missing image links from the report, and then act on these at a later stage. Now I'm lost. Hang on. So the scripts I was just mentioning, like before and after, were on a per document basis. You can also do the same on a per job basis. So maybe you do certain things before you do the whole job, and then scripts before and after each export step or output step. You also have the option, if you work with layers, to use the layers in interesting ways. There's the obvious stuff, like you only print the visible layers, or the layers that are set to print, and not the other ones. But an interesting feature is also to print layer combinations. And you can do things like you have like the content that is shared between all versions of a document, and then you have English, French, and German. And MadeToPrint very easily lets you create, in this case, maybe 3 PDF files: the German PDF, the English PDF, and the French PDF. And if you organize your content adequately, you can very easily just get the right output from that. And then MadeToPrint will turn on and off the languages as needed. And it doesn't have to be languages, it could be regional versions or currency versions, or like some of the EU countries have the euro, others don't, and whatever. You can even decide on which layers to use or not to use by using our token engine. This is what, in the world of Color's PDF Toolbox, is the variables, so we call it tokens, but it's a very similar concept. So it's dynamic information. You can do calculations, you can pick up information from the document, from the metadata, from a job ticket, what have you. You can actually also do imposition. Of course, only for the formats where it makes sense, but in this case, PDF. So you can let's say you just need to print booklets, not necessarily high-end imposition. you can run the imposition as part of your MadeToPrint job. So you create a PDF file, and then the PDF pages get imposed according to the imposition setup. It's actually based on PDF Toolbox imposition engine, so it's quite powerful, quite fast, and can be made part of your MadeToPrint output steps. You can also use the full power of the PDF Toolbox engine as a post-processing step. Like you make a profile, you could use Adobe Acrobat or PDF Toolbox, make a profile, do, let's say, conversion to grayscale, something you cannot easily do in InDesign. You set up a KFPX file in PDF Toolbox, convert everything to grayscale, you reference that here, and then you do the post-processing. As I mentioned, you can use Acrobat profiles, Acrobat preflight profiles. You can use PDF Toolbox profiles. And you can even use variables. So it was pointed to as one of the new additions to MadeToPrint. You can use variables. So you can use, in the extreme case, the token engine, which is the variable engine in MadeToPrint, and create information in the form of a variable and send that into the PDF post-processing done by PDF Toolbox. So here, this highlights the use of the token engine, but this is sent through to the KFPX profile on PDF Toolbox to be used as a variable. And this is then actually the Colors PDF Toolbox dialog where you can configure your variable and then make use of that. So if you want to downsample for a certain image resolution, you can set this up in MadeToPrint, but it's being executed in PDF Toolbox. I have to talk faster now, I believe, because I've been informed that there's not too many minutes left. Anyway, configurability. There's a zillion ways. So you have seen some of the setup options already from MadeToPrint, but we don't stop here. You can do more. I already pointed to the token engine, the variables in MadeToPrint. You can use them in many places. Target file name, target document, target file path, all kinds of settings, and again use more or less the same mechanism. So you could, for example, pick up the document name and the output file extension and use that for the file naming. You can use all kinds of information. So document path, document information, document name, enterprise metadata, which would come from the Ludwig enterprise workflow system, XMP metadata, date and time, whatever. It's quite a long list. And you can even do manipulations of what you find. You can retrieve a string from XMP metadata and then only take the first 3 characters. And if character 4 is like this, you do something. You get the idea, right? So it's like a mini scripting language. You always get some indication of actually how to use each of these tokens because some of them are challenging. So you don't immediately understand how you're using them. There's some explanation, normally some example in the help, which is next to the fields. So this is just one description of the document info metadata. You will actually get the slides after the event. Karen, is it uploaded tonight already for today or tomorrow? for the slides to be shared with the attendees.
Well, per day, we will make them available.
Okay.
So tonight they will be available sent to
Okay.
everyone.
So we'll use Dropbox and put the slides there. You can look at this some more. Then there's stuff like, I was pointing to the fact that you can use a PDF export style in InDesign and then just use that in the setup for the MadeToPrint job. Sometimes you need to fine-tune things, like maybe you want the crop marks in a slightly different way. That was actually how it started, I believe. Somebody wanted to have a crop mark length that is different from InDesign's default. In the UI, you cannot influence this, but by scripting, you can. So there's a way now that you can actually set the length or the thickness of the crop mark using these parameter overrides. And you can override anything that actually can be controlled in InDesign, in this case, by UI, script, or programming API. It's quite powerful. And it's like most of the time you will not need this, but if you need this, you will be very happy to have the option. And you can influence all kinds of things in a more flexible way than you can do otherwise. So this again is just showing the number of options. So there's a long list of things you can fine-tune. So I was just talking about the crop marks. So printer mark weight. How thick are the lines that you use for crop marks? Then integration. I have to talk faster now. 5 minutes. Oh, I should be able to make that. Integration. So we've been talking about all the options for setup, about configurability. To me, it appears quite powerful. Now bring this all together in some actual production context. And MadeToPrint is available for these applications. So Quark Express, that was how we all started it. InDesign Server, InCopy, and Illustrator. The feature set is not the exact same feature set for each of these because also the applications are slightly different. InCopy is just a different beast. It's like an editor's typewriter machine, so to speak. And again, Illustrator is different from InDesign. But to the degree feasible, the features will be available. Some of the features will always be available, like the scripting before and after, or the post-processing using the PDF Toolbox engine. These are included in all of these products. So yeah, you can use these host applications to actually use MadeToPrint. And you can use it in a number of ways. So you can use batch feature, like you just open a folder and then process all the files in the folder. Hot folder, which is then automated, continuously pulling files from a hot folder or InDesign packages or whatever it is that you're processing. You can use XML job tickets. So maybe the critical information is rather in a job ticket file, then you don't want to move around the actual Express or InDesign files. You can integrate MadeToPrint with InFocus Switch. So then Switch would be taking care of all the logistics and would just feed files or whatever to MadeToPrint. We have had integration with Vue and K4 for a very long time, more or less since they started. Same for Woodwing Enterprise. Definitely for Quark Publishing System since 1995, 22 years ago. Or the Van Gennep plan system. We also think we can address scalability quite nicely. So in smaller operations, it doesn't matter. You just have your one machine, and the machine is processing the InDesign or Quark Express files, and all is nice and cool. But sometimes workflow demands are higher than that. So in a general sense, scalability means if you just buy the MadeToPrint standard version, which is the desktop version that you use interactively, we're talking about manual mode or batch mode, but not automation. You can also use MadeToPrint Auto, which hijacks the desktop application and turns it into an automatically processing tool. It's not a real server, but it's working amazingly well. It's also how we started back then. So in 1995, there was no Quark Express server. They only started doing that in like 2000 or so. We worked hard. It wasn't easy, but it was running very stably very soon. And you can imagine that in a newspaper production or magazine production, you don't want to have hiccups all the time and have to go to the server machine, restart or whatever. For the MadeToPrint Auto version, you have hot folders, which can. We also have K4 integration and so on. Yeah. Oh, we have all the integrations. So. Okay. Yeah. But it's hot folder, or like it's sitting on top of a desktop application. And then MadeToPrint Server, which in this form is only available with InDesign Server, is kind of true server processing. So there's no UI for the actual, in this case, InDesign or MadeToPrint while it's running. It's just doing its job. It's multi-instance on the same machine. So depending on your machine and your license, you can run as many processes at the same time on that server machine. It's recommended not to use more than one instance than you have per core. So if you have 16 core machine, you may use up to 16 instances. You could use more, but it doesn't get faster. It may get slower at some time. If one machine is not enough, you can use several machines. And we have mechanisms in place that two machines don't grab the same file at the same time. So we use locking mechanisms, so if one machine grabs a certain file, it's kind of reserved for that machine, it does all its work, and the other machine will then grab the next file, not also again the same file. And this works for all the setups, whether you have auto or server, it should be fine. You have to watch out for the licensing agreements in some cases, but that's the usual thing. Putting it all together in one picture, so to speak, I couldn't help myself but think of something like this. It's like, I mean, I'm from Germany, right? Cars and motors, and what can I say? So for me, in a way, I would summarize this into MadeToPrint being the incredible output machine, and I'm intentionally saying machine here. I hope this overview was useful for you in some fashion to get an idea of the kind of extensive capabilities and use cases you can address with MadeToPrint. Any questions? Yes?
Olaf, you gave the example of the credit cards.
Yes.
In the start. So you have different designs.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of a variable data machine, correct?
Yeah, it was
So,
pioneering variable data. Yeah.
So I understand for publishing that it's clear. For those kind of projects, how would you position MadeToPrint against, for example, an XMPy, which is completely focusing on variable data, output printing? If somebody comes to me or to anybody in the room says, okay, I have this project, I need to pull all kinds of data together, variable data, how can I counter an XMPy or another vendor who is focusing on that area?
Yeah. So I think XMPy is about putting the content together, so it's more on the content side. And it does that in a very flexible manner. There are other options out there. And MadeToPrint would be on the output side. So it may be that in certain environments where somebody is using XMPy or a similar solution, they find they have more advanced needs in terms of output. And then you would complement XMPy and MadeToPrint. So MadeToPrint is really about the output side, and then massaging, of course, before and after, and updating, what have you. But it's not about actually getting the content right.
So it would be a nice add-on.
Yeah, it would really...
Because XMPy is also using plugins.
They run inside InDesign through a plugin. Yeah. Okay, other questions? Then I would like to thank you for being here.
Thank you.